Hello everybody, my name is Thomas Stinson. Welcome to the first official video on Touchdown Thomas TDT. Today I am going to be starting off a series that I hope to do for all 32 teams in the NFL, known as the State of the Team. Today I'm going to be starting off with a team that had so much potential for this year and looked promising and looked like they were going to go on to big things and maybe be a dark wild horse Super Bowl candidate. But it all got shut down due to some of the worst coaching I have ever seen. That team was the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Chargers, don't get me wrong, are a very strong team, and so I'm not going to probably have too many critiques about their roster per se. Because Justin Herbert, he's like I would argue, a top 10, maybe even a top 5 quarterback in the league. There's no problems there. Austin Eckler, superstar running back, no problems there. And the depth to the running back position, no problems there. Wide receivers, they have two strong receivers and some depth behind them. No problems there. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, two of the strongest you can get. No problems. Offensive line, they were battered up and injured this year, but they still got it done, and they are getting some of their stronger pieces back in Rashawn Slater and Trey Pipkins soon. So no problems there. The defense could use some work, but there's not any big things. Maybe they need a defensive tackle, but they've got Bosa. They got Joey Bosa, and Khalil Mack, both top-tier edge rushers in the league. They got Kenneth Murray, who's a great linebacker, and they've got J.C. Jackson and Derwin James covering the backfield. So that should be something to be looking forward to. That roster is built solid from top to bottom. There's not many changes they need to make. They just need to pay those guys when their contracts get up. The problem with the Chargers, and it is a glaring problem because it's the reason their season collapsed, ultimately, is the coaching. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, and you can choose to believe it or not. Once upon a time, there was a Los Angeles Chargers team taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Everything could go as perfect as could in the first half. The starting quarterback for the Jaguars threw 4 interceptions, and 3 of them to the same guy, whose name Asante Samuel Jr., who did a phenomenal job and became the first player in NFL history to get 3 picks in the first half in a playoff game. Now imagine that first half, and imagine the opposite happening in the second half. In the second half, they scored only 3 points total. In the total second half, 3 points. 2 full quarters, half an hour. Essentially adds up a point per 10 minutes, which is horrible. They went from 27 points in the first half to 3 points in the second half. And what ultimately happened was the Jaguars, who did get a touchdown in the first half, would go on to score almost 23 unanswered points. Or 23, 24, I don't even know. They would go on to score touchdown after touchdown after touchdown and then end the game with a field goal. And ultimately win 31-30 after being down 27-0 at one point. That happened. That actually happened in a playoff game this last Saturday on primetime. Unbelievable. And why was this the case? Well, it's quite simple. The coaches didn't know what the hell to do. Offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, who was just released today, thank the heavens, couldn't call anything right offensively. They kept passing the ball when they could have easily just ran the clock out and played a little more conservative. They didn't have to go full-blown conservative, but they could have ran the ball a lot more when your running back is Austin Eckler, who's a top 5 running back in the league. Having Justin Herbert throw the ball, not a bad idea when you're down or maybe up by a little bit, but when you're up 27, you use your superstar running back. And it's because of this he got fired. Was it now 2 or 3 days after the game? In my opinion, that was too late. 2 or 3 days too late. So Joe Lombardi, that's one coach down. But the other problem is the head coach, which is Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley is somebody who I called for his head after the first season, after he blew the Chargers' playoff chances by calling a timeout in overtime against the Raiders with no chance of getting the ball back. They could have tied the game. They were at a tie point. They were at a tie game at that point. If they tied, both teams would have made the playoffs. The Raiders at that point controlled were already going to get in because they would have either ran the clock out and tied it, or they would have won the game of something. But the Chargers didn't need to call that timeout. They did anyways, and it got the Raiders motivated to go and kick that field goal and knock them out. That was when I wanted him fired. And then that was any worse, the next year, Week 18, the Chargers are locked into the 5 seed of the playoffs. They can't go any higher or lower. They are forced to play the Jaguars. They know they're playing the Jaguars. And yet, for some reason, Brandon Staley decided to play all of his starters for at least 3 and almost 3.5 quarters. And it's because of this issue that Mike Williams, one of their star receivers, got hurt with a back injury and missed the game. Who could have been crucial on maintaining their lead, by the way. So not only do you injure your starters, and not only do you injure your starting star wide receiver, you also go in with a lack of with almost some sense of demotivation because you lost the game to Denver despite playing your starters. And Denver is a bottom of the barrel team whose quarterback was a train wreck. So on top of that, not only in Week 18 do they pull off that stupidity, but then he is ultimately responsible for that collapse in the wildcard game against the Jaguars. He is the one who allowed that 27-0 comeback to happen and only scored 3 points in the half. As a coach, I would be disappointed and I would hang my head in shame. But Staley just seemed to blow it off. And you know the worst part about all this? You want to know how I know his coaching wasn't doing anything? The reason why the game wasn't tied at the end of this and was a victory was because he couldn't control his player from keeping his cool after the Jaguars scored a touchdown. Joey Bosa, a top edge rusher, who presumably thought there was a false start or anything, and when you look back at the play, he had a bit of a case, but he decided to throw his helmet down on the field twice. And Staley did just about nothing to stop him from doing that. And the worst part about this was his second offense of this. He did it earlier in the game. You think that would have rang a bell for Staley to tell him, stop doing that or you're going to be in serious trouble. But it was apparently he didn't do enough to where Bosa just did it again. And allowed the Jaguars to go for 2, make it a 30-28 game, and then ultimately it ended 30-31. So, my thoughts on this team is that their future is reliant on getting a brand new head coach that could help them steer the ship and help develop these players towards the right direction. Because Brandon Staley is too conservative and too stupid to make it happen. Now, here's what I would do. Firing Staley, I would have done it already. So find a point in time to get rid of Staley, tell him you're relieved of your duties, and go search for a new head coach. Now, what's the coach that's best on the market? Everybody's going after Sean Payton, the former New Orleans Saints head coach who won a Super Bowl with them and was the reason Drew Brees had a Hall of Fame career, or one of the reasons. Sean Payton will not go for free, though, or under a simple contract. In this case, since he was still under the quote-unquote roster of the Saints, they would have to trade for him. And I honestly can't even remember the last time I've heard of a coach being traded to a team. If that happens normally, then I haven't seen it, but I don't think that happens normally. So the Saints are asking for a first-round pick and a little more, maybe a lot more, who knows, but they're asking for at least a first-round pick for Sean Payton. The Chargers have a first-round pick that I feel they'd be willing to give up, or they should give up at least. They have no reason to use it in this draft when their roster's already filled from head to toes. And in terms of defensive tackle, they're not going to get much talent in that draft position. So trading that first-round pick to get Sean Payton, not a bad stud feat in my opinion, for a coach who is already going to lock himself into the Hall of Fame for getting Brees into the Hall of Fame and winning a Super Bowl. So that would be my first move. Second move, get a competent offensive coordinator. You already did the right thing in getting rid of Joe Lombardi. That guy was just not working for them, and he didn't work on the Saints either. So him going also could be an indicator of that, I'm hoping. But whatever the case, get yourselves a competent offensive coordinator that can call the right plays and use Eckler and Herbert as effectively and efficiently as possible. Because if you can get that offense running, then you should be all set. And then finally, the main thing that they need to keep doing, and something they've been a victim of, health. They've got to keep their guys healthy because the past 2 years, and I'd say even 3 years, they've had to deal with injuries a lot, and it hasn't helped them. If they can keep their guys healthy, if they can keep their whole lineup healthy, then they have a really good chance of getting to the Super Bowl next year, and it would be the first time in at least 20 years, maybe even 30, that they would get there. I think this is good for them. They are trending down the right path, but the only way they can stay on that path is revamping that whole coaching system. Except for defensive coordinator, maybe you can keep him along if you want. But my point is, the offensive coordinator, you got rid of that guy. Now you got to get rid of the head coach next. Get Sean Payton and get a good offensive coordinator. And that is all for my discussion and my analysis on the Chargers. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to link my intro video again and my channel at the end of this video, and I will see you next time, which will probably be in a couple days. Bye.